Even the worst person can occasionally do a good thing. In the movies, it happens with some regularity. Keep watching for some bad guys who redeem themselves. A little, at least. Few MCU characters undergo such radical evolution as Thor's adopted brother Loki, and many fans would agree that Loki switched from supervillain to superhero a while ago. But in 2013's Thor: The Dark World, he's still fresh from his mass murder in Avengers. If nothing else is proof that he's still got a toe in the dark side, there's his aid to Curse during the Dark Elf assault on Asgard and his subjugation of Odin at the end of the film. While we still see a more heroic side to the trickster god in the Dark Elf world. When Thor attempts to destroy the ether with his lightning, Loki rushes to shield Jane Foster from any harm. Moments later, when Curse lobs one of the black hole grenades at the heroes, Loki nearly sacrifices himself to push Jane out of the way. Finally, when Curse proves too powerful for Thor to handle alone, it's Loki's deceit that kills the Dark Elf after he secretly attaches a black hole grenade to the monster. In 1983's Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker rejects the repeated advice of Yoda and Obi-Wan, who insist there is no salvation possible for Darth Vader. Luke willingly surrenders himself to Imperial forces, believing Anakin Skywalker is still alive within Vader. Vader brings Luke to Palpatine, and ultimately Luke must once more duel his father, but this time his victory nearly pushes him to the dark side. In the end, Luke's faith in his father is redeemed. As Palpatine tortures Luke with Force lightning, Vader looks back and forth between his son and the Emperor, eventually choosing what no one expects but everyone prays for. Rather than let his son die, he lifts Palpatine from the floor and, battered by the Emperor's lightning, hurls his former master down a long shaft. In the end, Anakin not only saves his son, but proves he really is the chosen one the late Qui-Gon Jinn knew he was so many years ago. In 2004's Spider-Man 2, Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock, proves to be a much more sympathetic villain than his predecessor Green Goblin. After the robotic arms he initially uses only to aid him in his scientific pursuits are fused to his body, we learn the arms possess a malevolent intelligence which begins influencing everything Octavius does. Octavius is transformed into an obsessed monster who will do anything, including kill, to realize his scientific goals. Thankfully, by the end of the film, Octavius is able to emerge from the arm's influence and redeem himself. In the climax, Octavius' experimental fusion reactor is going wild and endangering not only Spider-Man and Mary Jane, but the entire city. Finally able to assert his dominance over the robot arms, Octavius uses them to save New York by plunging the reactor into the East River. The last we see of him, Octavius' seemingly lifeless body follows the reactor toward the bottom of the river.
I will not die a monster.
Long before they introduced us to the dude of the Big Lebowski, Joel and Ethan Coen gave audiences the 1990 gangster film Miller's Crossing. Gabriel Byrne stars as Tom Reagan, a high-ranking advisor in the Irish mob who goes rogue when his boss starts to get edged out of business by his Italian rival, the unpredictable Johnny Caspar. Tom's risky gambit is a long con, confusing both friend and foe alike so he can win Caspar's confidence and destroy him from the inside. Through sheer relentlessness, one person is able to sniff out Tom's game: Caspar's brutal right-hand man Eddie Dane, aka the Dane. Toward the end of the film, Tom is summoned to Caspar's home, where the Dane waits to kill him. At first, Caspar goes along with the Dane's plans, doing nothing as he chokes the life out of Tom. But just as Tom begins to fade, Caspar crushes the Dane's nose with a fireplace shovel, saving Tom and yelling that it was the Dane who double-crossed him. Minutes later, Caspar says to Tom, "Look at this, kid, something I try to teach all my boys." He strides over to his desk, gets a gun, and shoots the Dane in the head.
Always put one in the brain!
For much of 2017's Thor Ragnarok, Skurge isn't particularly impressive. Not only is he the only warrior at the Bifrost who doesn't lift a hand to stop Hela when she arrives in Asgard, but even after he becomes her so-called executioner, he pretty much just fields Hela's evil monologues and lets the army of the dead and Fenris do all the heavy lifting. In the final battle, rather than commit to either side, Skurge disguises himself and boards the refugee ship, hoping to escape. However, after Hela summons one of her spikes to stop the refugee ship and her undead minions begin pouring into the vessel, Skurge finally finds his courage. He unveils his beloved rifles, Des and Troy, and mows down the unliving soldiers before they can overtake the ship. Sacrificing his own escape for that of his brethren, Skurge leaps from the ship and fights off the army of the dead as the ship pulls away. Like his comic book counterpart's heroic last stand in 1985's Thor number 362, Skurge ultimately dies for Asgard as Hela kills him once she sees he switched sides. One of the most memorable scenes in 1993's Jurassic Park is the unveiling of the gargantuan T-Rex. After escaping her enclosure, she takes one of the first human victims of the film when she devours the lawyer on the toilet. She comes close to killing Hammond's grandkids when she nudges their car off a ledge and injures the chaos theorist Ian Malcolm enough to keep him on his back for the rest of the film. But in the end, it's the T-Rex who proves to be the hero's salvation. In the film's final act, Hammond's grandchildren are hunted by the deadly velociraptors in the visitor center. Ellie and Grant do their best to help the children, but eventually all four of them are trapped by two of the hungry beasts in the center's main room. Just as one of the raptors is about to strike, the T-Rex reappears, snatches it off the floor with its jaws, kills it, and begins eating it. As the second raptor attacks the T-Rex, the heroes take the opportunity to escape. In the 1988 action comedy Midnight Run, everybody wants to capture the fugitive accountant Jonathan Mardukas. The luckless bounty hunter Jack Walsh has Mardukas in custody for most of the film, but they're pursued by the FBI Special Agent Alonzo Mosley, the mob, and rival bounty hunter Marvin Dorfler. In Texas, Walsh and Mardukas are cornered by two mob goons. The heroes find an unlikely savior in the form of the brutal Marvin Dorfler, who knocks both goons out with the butt of his shotgun. Walsh has no intention of giving his bounty up to Dorfler, so he handcuffs himself to Mardukas and seemingly throws away the key. Dorfler loads them both into his car, and they soon find themselves pursued by a helicopter with a gangster sharpshooter on board. Eventually, things get desperate enough that Walsh convinces Dorfler to give him a gun, and the former takes out the chopper with a shot to the tail rotor. As Dorfler celebrates their salvation, Walsh sucker punches him, knocking him unconscious. Dissimilar to the Marvel comics, it's rare that X-Men's old enemy Magneto would ally himself with his rivals or ever join their team. The first time something like this happens in the film adaptations, however, is in the aptly named X2 X-Men United. After a confrontation with the Boston police turns violent outside Bobby Drake's home, the X-Men's Blackbird is pursued by a pair of fighter jets. By dialing her powers up to 11, Storm is able to get both pilots to eject, but not before one of them fires off two missiles. Jean takes out one of the missiles with her telekinesis, but the second detonates close enough to the Blackbird to send it spinning to the ground below. As the jet drops, it inexplicably slows and finally comes to a halt mere feet from the ground. From outside the jet, we see Mystique and Magneto, with the latter extending his arm and using his powers to keep the jet from crashing. As the X-Men begin to realize what's happened, Magneto jokes to Mystique,
"When will these people learn how to fly?"
In the 1993 romantic crime drama True Romance, things change in a big way for comic book store clerk Clarence and former sex worker Alabama. This is when a combination of vigilante justice and dumb luck deposits a suitcase full of uncut cocaine in their laps. They manage to get wealthy movie producer Lee Donowitz to take the drugs off their hands for a hefty sum, and the deal takes place in an expensive LA hotel suite. Unbeknownst to anyone else in the suite, Donowitz's assistant Elliot is working as an informant for the LAPD. Once the deal is finalized, the cops charge in, but Donowitz's private security guards refuse to stand down. The standoff gets more complicated when the mobsters who want their drugs back burst into the suite. Surprisingly, the standoff turns violent because of the unarmed Donowitz. The producer goes wild when he realizes Elliot betrayed him and throws a tray full of hot coffee in his assistant's face. Detective Nicholson opens fire in response, and soon everyone is shooting. Elliot, Donowitz, all of Donowitz's security, all the cops, and almost all of the mobsters quickly die. One of the gangsters makes it as far as the hotel lobby, where he's gunned down by uniformed police. The only survivors are Clarence, Alabama, and their friend Dick, though Clarence loses an eye in the exchange. Who would have thought that a deadly three-way shootout would become their saving grace? In 2001's The Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring, during the hero's trip through Moria, Gandalf had some wise words for Frodo. He tells him that he should have pity on Gollum, as Bilbo did when he spared Gollum's life years prior. Gandalf believes Gollum has a part to play in their story still, saying,
"The pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of men."
The words prove prophetic more than once. First, in spite of Gollum's inevitable betrayal, Frodo and Sam would never have made it to Mordor without him. Second, in The Two Towers, it's Gollum who rescues Frodo when the Hobbit is mesmerized by the ghostly lights of the dead marshes and nearly drowns. Finally, there's the destruction of the One Ring.
When he finally makes it to Mount Doom, like the human Isildur before him, Frodo is overcome by the ring and decides to keep it. He puts it on, immediately drawing the attention of Sauron and his wraiths. It's only because of Gollum's timely intervention, chomping Frodo's finger off, that Sauron is defeated. In the struggle that follows, both Frodo and Gollum fall over the edge. While Sam saves Frodo, Gollum descends into the lava below, dying and taking the ring with him. It may not have been Gollum's virtuous intention, but his lust for the ring became the salvation for many. His accidental sacrifice not only saved Frodo from the ring's power, but also the rest of the world. The replicant Roy does some terrible things in the 1982 sci-fi classic Blade Runner, but in the film's climax, he chooses to save the life of Deckard, despite the fact that he is the hero who is not only hunting him, but has already killed two of the three replicants who worked with Roy, including his lover Pris. After Pris's death, Roy pursues Deckard through the Bradbury building, knowing he only has minutes to live and presumably resolving to take Deckard with him. Deckard manages to escape the building to the rooftops but loses his gun in the process. Unarmed and facing the super-strong Roy, Deckard has no choice but to flee across the rooftops, but he's no Spider-Man.
His jump is short on the way from one roof to the other, and he begins slipping from the opposite ledge. Rather than letting him fall, Roy easily leaps to the ledge, waits until Deckard finally loses his grip, and grabs a Blade Runner's wrist. With one hand, Roy lifts Deckard and deposits him to safety. In his final moments, Roy tells Deckard about some of the amazing things he's seen in space, regretting that those moments will be lost in time like tears in the rain. Considering his words, it seems likely Roy chose to save his opponent not out of forgiveness or any sudden surge of moral righteousness. Rather, because as a man seconds from death, he values life, even that of an enemy, more than vengeance. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite movie bad guys are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.